The sting of that evening still lingers, sharp as a blade. It was our 15th wedding anniversary, a milestone we celebrated with a lavish dinner at our home. The dining room glowed under the chandelier's soft light, the table set with crystal glasses and silver cutlery that gleamed against the white linen. Mark's colleagues from the law firm filled the room, their laughter mingling with the clink of wine glasses. I wore a deep green dress, one Mark once said made me look elegant but not showy, and moved through the crowd, refilling drinks, exchanging pleasantries, playing the perfect hostess. Mark, as always, commanded the room, his voice carrying that confident charm that had drawn me to him years ago. He raised his glass for a toast, his eyes glinting. To my victories in the courtroom, to my thriving practice, and to my wife, Emily, who keeps the home fires burning. The guests chuckled, clinked glasses, but then Mark leaned toward his partner, Daniel, and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "She'd be nothing without me, right, Em?" The table erupted in laughter, as if it were a harmless jest. I froze, the wine bottle heavy in my hand, my smile tightening like a mask. My throat burned, but I forced a laugh, nodding as if I were in on the joke. It was his way, slipping a barb into a compliment, cutting me down while keeping up appearances. To everyone else, it was charming. To me, it was a reminder that I was just the wife who managed his life, while he basked in the spotlight as the city's top defense attorney. That night, lying in bed, the laughter echoed in my mind like a taunt. I stared at the ceiling, remembering when we met in law school, both of us ambitious, equals chasing big dreams. I'd put my career on hold to support his, editing his briefs, organizing his files, even suggesting strategies that won his cases. Over time, I'd become invisible, his silent partner in a one-man show. He loved it that way, loved the power of keeping me in his shadow. But that night something shifted. His words, "You'd be nothing without me," weren't just a joke. They were a challenge, and I felt a quiet resolve begin to form, like a spark in the dark. The morning after our anniversary dinner, Mark left early as usual, tossing a casual "don't forget to call the accountant" over his shoulder as he grabbed his briefcase. I stood in the kitchen, the scent of last night's wine still lingering, my coffee growing cold in its mug. On the counter sat a stack of his legal documents, case notes, contracts, emails he never bothered to read but expected me to handle. I stared at them, my fingers tracing the edges of the papers. He didn't know, or perhaps didn't care, that I still had connections in the legal world, people who remembered me from law school, who valued the work I did before I became Mark's wife. To him, I was just Emily, the one who kept his life in order while he dazzled in court. I called Sarah, my old law school friend, now a partner at a nonprofit legal aid group. "You're still editing Mark's briefs?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. I admitted I was, and she let out a sharp laugh. "Emily, half his clients trust him because of your work. You're the reason his cases don't fall apart." Her words hit me like a cold wave. I knew my behind-the-scenes efforts propped up his success, but hearing it out loud twisted something inside me. It wasn't just that he never acknowledged it. It was that he believed I was nothing without him. That afternoon, an email arrived from Ms. Carter, a senior attorney at a community advocacy group I'd worked with years ago. She wanted to meet for coffee to discuss a high-stakes case, a pro bono defense for a local shelter facing a wrongful eviction. "You were always the sharpest mind on our team, Emily," she wrote. "We need you, not Mark." I read the message over and over, my pulse racing. It was the first time in years someone saw me as more than an extension of my husband. The words stirred something dormant, a hunger to reclaim the lawyer I used to be, the one who dreamed of making a difference, not just fixing someone else's mistakes. I replied, agreeing to meet, my hands trembling as I typed. It felt like a small act of rebellion, a step toward something dangerous and exhilarating. The meeting with Ms. Carter was set for a quiet cafe downtown, its walls lined with bookshelves and the air thick with the scent of roasted coffee. Mark thought I was running errands, oblivious as always, and I didn't correct him. I wore a simple blazer, the kind I used to wear in law school, and felt a flicker of my old self as I walked through the door. Ms. Carter was waiting, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes sharp with purpose. She got straight to the point. The shelter's eviction case was a David versus Goliath battle against a powerful real estate firm. "We need a strategy that's airtight, Emily," she said. "You're the best legal mind I know for this. I want you to lead it." Her words landed like a spark on dry tinder. "Lead a case? Me?" I hesitated, my mind racing with doubts. It had been years since I'd done more than edit Mark's work, years since I'd stood in a courtroom. But Ms. Carter's confidence was unwavering, and something in her gaze made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in ages. "It has to stay quiet," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Mark can't know." She nodded, understanding more than I said, and we sealed the agreement with a handshake. When I got home, my heart was still pounding. Mark was in his study, muttering about a difficult client, papers strewn across his desk. He didn't look up, just said, "Em, can you book my flight for the conference next month?" I nodded, but inside a storm was brewing. The memory of his anniversary toast, "You'd be nothing without me," played on repeat, each word a weight I was tired of carrying. That night I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the shelter's case file Ms. Carter had sent. It was daunting, but it was mine. I wasn't just fixing someone else's work. I was building something of my own. The injustice of Mark's words, his assumption that I was nothing without him, fueled a quiet determination. He was wrong, and I would prove it. Not with confrontation, but with a victory he'd never see coming. The weeks after my meeting with Ms. Carter were a delicate balancing act. By day, I was the Emily Mark expected, folding his laundry, scheduling his meetings, proofreading his briefs with the precision he relied on but never acknowledged. I'd smile as I handed him his tie, nod at his stories of courtroom triumphs, and keep the house running like clockwork. But when night fell and he was asleep or out at client dinners, I climbed the creaky stairs to the attic, my sanctuary of dusty books and a wobbly desk. Under the faint glow of a single lamp, I poured myself into the shelter's eviction case. It was a beast of a project. Complex legal arguments, stacks of precedent, and a tight deadline that demanded perfection. Every clause I wrote, every strategy I mapped, felt like reclaiming a piece of the lawyer I used to be. I'd work until my eyes burned, the attic's chill seeping into my bones. Sometimes I'd pause and catch my reflection in the window, my face pale but alive with a fire I hadn't felt in years. It was the Emily who argued mock trials in law school, not the one who faded into Mark's shadow. Ms. Carter's emails were a lifeline, her praise. "Your strategy is brilliant, Emily," fueling me through sleepless nights. I saved each one, a secret tally of my worth. Mark, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware. He'd come home, toss a sloppy brief on the counter and say, "Fix this for me, Em." I'd spend hours correcting his errors, saving his reputation, and he'd barely nod. "You're good at this," he'd say, as if my work was a hobby, not the backbone of his success. His dismissals, once wounds, became sparks. Each one reminded me of his anniversary toast, "You'd be nothing without me," and stoked my resolve. I wasn't just building a case, I was building myself. The shelter's team trusted my lead, their respect a stark contrast to Mark's indifference. I kept my work hidden, knowing the truth would stay buried until the right moment. In the attic, surrounded by shadows, I felt alive, crafting a plan to prove him wrong, not with words, but with a victory that would speak louder than his taunts. One evening, as I finalized a motion for the shelter's case, my phone buzzed with a call from Ms. Carter. "Emily, we're ready to present the defense at the Legal Aid Conference in 2 weeks, she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "You have to be there. This is your case." My heart lurched. The conference was the biggest event in our field, where Mark always shone, charming judges and clients alike. He was already prepping, convinced he'd land a high-profile case from a firm tied to Ms. Carter's network. This could be my big break, he'd boasted over dinner, oblivious to the fact that I'd already secured the shelter's defense. I told Ms. Carter I'd attend, but asked her to keep my role secret until the presentation. "I wanted to be a surprise," I said, and she chuckled, sensing the weight behind my words. "You've earned this, Emily," she replied. That night, Mark came home with a rare bouquet of roses, a gesture that felt more performative than genuine. "For you, Em," he said, grinning. "I'm feeling good about the conference. That firm's case is mine." I smiled, arranging the flowers in a vase, but inside my stomach churned. He was so certain, so blind, assuming the world revolved around him. Part of me wanted to shatter his illusion, to tell him the case was mine, but silence was sharper. I let him talk, let him dream of a victory. In the days that followed, I prepared meticulously. I chose a navy blazer for the conference, the same one I wore at our anniversary dinner, a quiet nod to the night he'd humiliated me. I reviewed every detail of the case, ensuring no argument could be challenged. My team sent updates, their trust in me a balm to years of being overlooked. Mark's confidence, meanwhile, grew louder. He asked me to edit a pitch he'd written for the firm, and I saw it was riddled with my ideas, lifted from notes I'd left on his desk. He didn't notice. I didn't correct him. Let him carry my work, I thought, knowing it would lead him nowhere. In the attic, as I polished my presentation, I felt a calm resolve. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about reclaiming my voice, my place, my worth. The night before the legal aid conference, Mark was a whirlwind of energy, pacing the living room with his laptop open, rehearsing his pitch for the firm he thought he'd win over. He handed me a draft, saying, "Em, give this a quick look, will you?" I scanned it and saw my own words staring back, arguments I'd drafted for the shelter's case, ideas I'd jotted down months ago, now repurposed as his own. He'd found my notes, assumed they were his, and built his entire pitch around them. The irony was almost poetic. He was banking on my work to secure a case I'd already won. I didn't say a word, just handed it back with a nod, letting him believe he was in control. Inside, I felt a quiet thrill, knowing the truth would unravel his illusion tomorrow. After he went to bed, I climbed to the attic, my sanctuary of dim light and scattered papers. I reviewed my presentation one last time, every slide a testament to months of sleepless nights and fierce determination. The shelter's case was airtight, my arguments sharp enough to cut through any opposition. I stood in front of the small attic window, staring at the city lights below, and pictured myself on that stage, not as Mark's wife, but as Emily, the lawyer who'd outdone him in silence. His anniversary taunt, "You'd be nothing without me," echoed in my mind, no longer a wound but a spark. I wasn't just proving him wrong. I was proving myself right. Mark stirred downstairs, calling out, "Em, you coming to bed?" I answered softly, "In a minute," and stayed where I was. I pulled the navy blazer from the closet, the one I'd wear tomorrow, its weight a reminder of the night he'd humiliated me. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about justice, about stepping out of the shadow he'd cast over me for years. As I folded the blazer over the chair, I felt a calm certainty settle in. The stage was set, and I was ready to claim it, not with shouts, but with the quiet power of truth. The conference hall buzzed with anticipation, a sea of suits and murmured conversations under the glow of chandeliers. Mark was in his element, gliding through the crowd, his smile polished as he shook hands with judges and partners. I slipped in quietly, wearing the navy blazer from our anniversary dinner, its weight a silent reminder of his words that night. "You'd be nothing without me." No one noticed me at first. Just another face in the crowd. until Ms. Carter caught my eye from across the room, giving a subtle nod. I took a seat near the back, my heart steady but pounding, like a drumbeat counting down to the moment I'd waited for. When the time came for the shelter's case presentation, Ms. Carter took the stage. She spoke with conviction, detailing the eviction defense, the legal strategy that saved a community cornerstone. The slides showed my work, every precedent, every argument, crafted in the attic's dim light. Mark sat a few rows ahead, smiling, certain the firm's case he'd pitched was his for the taking. Then Ms. Carter paused, her voice clear. "This victory belongs to a brilliant mind, one too often overlooked. Emily, will you join me?" The room fell silent, a heavy electric hush. Heads turned, eyes searching. Mark's smile froze, his face draining of color as he realized what was happening. I stood, my steps measured but firm, the navy blazer brushing my sides as I walked to the stage. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. The weight of the moment was enough, carrying the truth he'd ignored for years. On stage, I took the microphone, my voice calm but unwavering. "This case was about justice," I said. "Not just for the shelter, but for those who work in the shadows, unseen." The applause was thunderous, a wave that crashed over me, washing away years of invisibility. Mark sat motionless, his hands clenched, his eyes fixed on me. Not with pride, but with shock. After stepping off the stage, I was swarmed by colleagues, their faces alight with admiration. Lawyers who'd never glanced my way now pressed business cards into my hand, asking for my input, my contact, my time. Ms. Carter stood by me, introducing me to partners and judges, her pride evident in every word. "Emily's the one to watch," she said, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years, a validation that wasn't tied to Mark. I was no longer just his wife. I was Emily, the lawyer who'd turned a shelter's fate around. Each handshake, each nod of respect, was a brick in the foundation of the life I was reclaiming, built from the ashes of years spent in his shadow. Mark found me moments later, his face flushed, his jaw tight. He pulled me aside, his voice low but sharp. "You did this behind my back?" he hissed, trying to keep his composure in the crowded hall. His eyes burned with a mix of anger and betrayal, as if I'd stolen something that was rightfully his. I met his gaze, calm and unflinching, and reached into my blazer pocket. "You said I'd be nothing without you, Mark," I said softly, handing him a copy of the shelter's case file, my name bold on the cover. "Read it. You'll see who carried this." I turned away, leaving him clutching the file, his silence louder than any argument we'd ever had. There were no raised voices, no dramatic scene, just the quiet weight of truth, laid bare for all to see. As I rejoined the crowd, answering questions about the case, I felt lighter, unburdened. Mark stood across the room, the file still in his hands, his usual charm replaced by something smaller, more human. For the first time, he wasn't the center of the room. I was. And it wasn't about humiliating him. It was about standing in my own light, proving to myself what I'd always known but let him erase. I was enough. That night, I drove home alone, the city's lights blurring past like distant stars. The house was still, the dining room dark, no trace of the anniversary dinner's clinking glasses or cruel laughter. Mark didn't come home. I didn't expect him to. For once, the silence wasn't heavy. It was liberating, like shedding a coat I'd worn too long. I sat at the kitchen table, a glass of water untouched, staring out at the skyline. I pictured the shelter, safe now because of my work, a beacon for those who needed it. It wasn't just a case. It was proof of who I was, who I'd always been beneath Mark's shadow. The next morning, I found a note on the counter in Mark's hurried scrawl. "Need space." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That note was his admission, his way of grappling with the truth I'd laid bare on that stage. I'd said everything I needed with the case file in his hands, my name on it, the applause ringing in my ears. I sipped my coffee, the quiet of the house wrapping around me like a warm blanket. For the first time, this place felt like mine. Not ours, not his, but mine. The shelter's victory made waves. Legal journals praised the strategy, and my inbox filled with offers. Firms wanting my expertise, nonprofits seeking my counsel. I took meetings, gave talks, each step cementing my place in a world I'd been locked out of. Mark returned days later, his face drawn, his usual bravado gone. He tried to talk, to promise change, to pull me back to the role of his silent supporter. We're a team, he said, his voice cracking. I looked at him, calm, and said, I've always been a team. Mark, you just never saw it. He left again. Quieter this time. I heard he's still practicing, still winning cases, but now, when he signs a brief, I know he thinks of me, of the file I handed him, of the moment the room clapped for me. The shelter stands strong, and sometimes I visit, watching families find refuge. It's not just a building. It's my legacy, a marker of the Emily I fought to reclaim. Standing there, the wind soft against my face, I know